then it's a pleasure to welcome Nick Spencer to the stage. Nick Spencer is a research director in the British think tank Theos and has worked extensively with issues related to Christianity in contemporary society. Also authored several books, one of them titled Darwin and God, which gives an interesting account of Darwin's religious beliefs. So welcome. Please give him a hand.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for your welcome and your hospitality over tonight, and indeed the last few days. This is my first time in Oslo, and I've had a lovely time. It's also a humbling experience to go abroad and to speak to an audience whose English is better than many of the audiences I speak to in England, actually. So I'm humbled by that and grateful that you have allowed me to speak to you in English rather than Norwegian, which would have been an extremely painful experience, believe me. I'll talk just for 10 or 15 minutes by way of introduction. Nearly 40 years ago, the sociologist Peter Berger wrote this in the New York Times. By the 21st century, religious believers are likely to be found only in small sects, huddled together to resist a worldwide secular culture. This surely ranks as one of the worst predictions in the history of sociology, and there are a good many competitors. It marks a high point, if you like, in the secularization thesis. The idea that within a generation or two, religious groups worldwide, and not marked simply in America or Western Europe, would be isolated and needing protection from a global culture that was secular. In 1999, Peter Berger recanted. He wrote a book entitled The Desecularization of the World, in which he said, "The assumption that we live in a secularized world is false. The world today, with some exceptions, is as furiously religious as it ever was, and in some places more so than ever. God is back." It's worth pointing out just in passing that being back on the agenda is not necessarily a good thing. One wit put it this way: religion is back on the political agenda in the same way as global warming is on the political agenda. Pay attention to us or we will wreck your civilization. Nevertheless, whether or not it's a good thing to be back on the agenda, it's worth asking why it is there, why religion is on our social and political radars in the 21st century in the way that people a generation or two ago did not think it would be. Well, in one respect, the answer is obvious. It's the rise of political Islam has put religion, and in particular, religion's relationship with public life, back on the national and indeed international agenda in an unprecedented way. The problem with this answer, however, is that while it's true, it is by no means the whole truth. And what's more, it's true in a decidedly negative way. If this were indeed the only reason why religion was back, who could blame secularists for being so resentful and aggressive on occasion? I would like to suggest that there are a number of other reasons why faith is back. Some pertain to basic trends of population, such as immigration and birth rate. Levels of immigration to Western Europe and to Britain in particular in the last 15 years have been unprecedentedly high, and as a rule, immigrants tend to be more religious than non-immigrants and often identify themselves in their migrating community as religious. There are also basic demographic facts. When it comes to birth rate, the indisputable fact is, wherever you go around the world, that religious people have more children than non-religious people, and conservative religious people have more children than liberal religious people. The demographic dice are loaded. But beyond migrating and breeding, there are other interesting trends that we may talk about tonight. My experience is particularly within the British context, but I think they apply, or at least some of them apply, to other, certainly Western European contexts. One is the return of civil society. As state-based welfare provision slowly withdraws, it is exposing a long hidden shore of civil society in which religious groups in general, and the churches in particular, have and are playing a significant role. This alone is likely to open up public space for religious discourse. A second is the emergence of the politics of well-being. One of the most important trends in the modern West is the decoupling of wealth and life satisfaction. We have got pretty much consistently better off over the last 45 to 50 years or so, but our reported levels of life satisfaction or well-being have not increased in the same way. This has oriented some public rhetoric and even some policy towards a goal that has historically been firmly established in religious territory, the idea of well-being or flourishing. In this way, politics is coming back to religion rather than the other way round. The third trend is the emergence of the politics of identity, a phenomenon that is very well expressed by Britain's former chief rabbi, Dr. Jonathan Sacks. Humans, he writes, are uniquely a meaning-seeking animal. Our most fundamental questions are, who am I, and to which narrative do I belong? The great hope of the liberal imagination that politics could be superseded with economics, replacing public good with private choice, was bound to fail because economics as such offers no answers to the big questions of who and why. Religion does, and that is its power in the contemporary world. The politics of ideology may have died, but it has been replaced not by the end of history, but by the politics of identity. All this amounts to a pretty strong conclusion that the role of religion in society in general and religious groups in community life in particular is likely to grow. So, if God is back and seemingly settling himself in for a long stay, what challenges does this present us with? All too often the arguments against doing God, as it's known in Britain, amount to little more than name-calling. This, however, does not mean there are no good reasons for excluding religious conviction from the public square. I would suggest that anyone like myself who is keen to engage in public life from an explicitly Christian or indeed an explicitly religious perspective must attend to them in order to be fair. And three in particular stand out. The first is that religiously motivated engagement in public life is inherently inflexible. Politics is, at best, the art of the possible, or at worst, in J.K. Galbraith's words, the art of choosing between the disastrous and the unpalatable. Whatever else it may be, it is the arena for compromise, and religions don't like compromise. Number two, religiously motivated engagement in public life is inherently inaccessible. Ideas driven and justified by my religious belief system can fragment public discourse and alienate those outside of my tradition. If I am motivated by a particular understanding of the world, which urges on me a particular system of values, which then expresses and embodies in a particular way, and everyone else does the same thing in the process, the risk is that we will lose our ability to have an informed, rational public debate and turn the public square into a fractured arena. The third challenge is that religiously motivated engagement in public square is inherently divisive. Religions are made up of people bound together by some idea of the divine and some idea of human well-being. Their identities are often highly motivated, non-negotiable and hard-edged. They alienate those beyond them, fracture discourse, and most seriously invest public debate with a weight that it cannot afford. Now, religious people who don't recognise those problems are not, I would argue, looking at their fellow believers honestly. I know a number of members of Parliament in Britain, a number of Christian members of Parliament in Britain, and they tell me, sometimes show me with a woeful shake of their head, some of the letters they get from Christian constituents. Very often, some of the most hostile and aggressive of the letters they get, and British MPs get a lot of hostile and aggressive posts. You are a Christian, you are an MP, you are in Parliament, why are you not legislating in this way? There is often, in other words, woefully little understanding of the structures and compromises that are needed in public life. The challenge, I would suggest, is to tread the middle way. Not to ignore those objections as if they were simply invented by angry secularists, nor, conversely, to obey the secular edict and put religion back in a box that is firmly labelled private. Instead, it is to engage in public life in a way that is flexible, cohesive, and accessible. Which begs three questions. First, to what extent is a religious group prepared to sacrifice certain articles of faith in order to participate in the public square or to achieve its goals in the public square? Pope John Paul II was not often cited as a model for compromise. He was well known for his absolute opposition to all forms of abortion. And yet he wrote in his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, "When it is not possible to overturn or completely abrogate a pro-abortion law, an elected official whose absolute personal opposition to procured abortion was well known could licitly support proposals aimed at limiting the harm done by such a law and at lessening its negative consequences at the level of general opinion and public morality. This does not in fact represent an illicit cooperation with an unjust law, but rather a legitimate and proper attempt to limit its evil aspects." Papal encyclicals are not always written in the most fluent of prose, so not all of that may have been eminently accessible, but the thrust of the argument is compromise in this, to the Pope's mind, most important of areas is legitimate to a certain extent and towards certain ends. And so the question then becomes, when we're dealing with religion in public life, how far is too far? How much is acceptable? Second, how far are you willing or indeed able to communicate in a language that includes people who do not share your conviction rather than excludes them? A great deal is made of this point, and I have read countless arguments which say that if a religious person, a Christian for the sake of argument, is prepared and willing to engage in public debate, say in the Houses of Parliament, they shouldn't stand up and defend their position by quoting the Bible or a papal encyclical. One of the duties and joys of my work is to sometimes read through Hansard, which is the chronicle of parliamentary activity in taking place in Westminster. And I have yet to read of a parliamentarian who stood up and justified their position on the basis of the Bible or a papal encyclical. For the simple reason that when you try and persuade people, you try and do so in a way that will be persuasive. You don't necessarily automatically begin by bringing your presuppositions into public, knowing that they will automatically alienate other people. We naturally engage in public discourse through publicly accessible reasoning. Admittedly, on a lot of occasions, Christians and other religious people are not necessarily minded to do that. So it does remain a challenge. How far are we prepared to be accessible? Finally, is the issue and question of cohesion. Can a religious group, without sacrificing its distinctive characteristics, work alongside other groups in a way that builds bridges rather than divides communities. Certainly from the UK, and I would hazard a guess here too, there are plenty of examples where they just do that. To take one, in a House of Lords debate in 2006 on this very issue, the Muslim peer, Lord Ahmed, spoke very positively of his experience working with the church as a councillor in Rotherham, receiving money from the Church Urban Fund and establishing an advice centre that empowered the entire local community. There are obvious reasons why different groups like this, different religious groups, can work together. Religiously motivated social activity tends to focus on shared ethical objectives, educating children, treating addictions, uniting families, protecting the elderly, building community life. They do not, by and large, focus on divisive doctrinal ones. There are, to my knowledge, very few religiously inspired projects in Britain for social welfare provision that major on the inerrancy of Scripture or the doctrine of the Trinity. These things just don't tend to come up. None of this means that all religious projects of this nature should be interfaith ones in order simply to prove that they're not divisive. Rather, it means that the question of divisiveness and how religious groups are relating to other religious groups and other non-religious groups must always be on the mind of those who are willing and desirous of engaging in public life. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nick. You certainly raised numerous challenges and questions, and I'm afraid we won't be able to cover all of them in the panel discussion, but some of them, hopefully. We will proceed in Norwegian with the debate, but you'll get a translation.